Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Thank you so much for making it in time and on time. That is allowing us to start right at the scheduled start time. On behalf of the Alliance for Climate Action South Africa, I would like to welcome you all to this very topical session on accessing climate finance for South African cities. My name is Hastings Chikoko, and I'm the C40 Managing Director of Regions and Mayoral Engagement, but also Regional Director for Africa. And it's really, really a great pleasure to join you this time to have this conversation. C40, along with the National Business Initiative and WWF, are co-conveners of the Alliance for Climate Action South Africa. This alliance is a network of cities, businesses, and other subnational and state actors akin to a domestic Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action. This alliance is, of course, a part of a global network. We have similar alliances in Japan, Vietnam, Australia, Argentina, Brazil. I hope my memory is not going to fail me. Mexico, the US, and Chile has just launched their alliance right here at COP26. Members of the South African Alliance stand for an economy that has net zero emissions by 2050, taking their own and collaborative action to help get there. And they also believe in supporting national government to fulfill its nationally determined contribution and advocate where it can do more. So it's about raising the ambition. It's about not just scratching the bare minimum, but do the best we can to get there. The South African C40 cities, Cape Town, Durban, Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg, and Tshwane, are all members of this alliance. And we are so delighted that you are part of this alliance, and we really value your contribution and your participation. These cities, along with other African cities, have been developed. Most of them have actually completed climate action plans that outline a pathway that meets the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Of course, this is through aiming to reach a net zero carbon future and a climate resilience by 2050, and taking bold action to reach these ambition goals. So these climate action plans, each time I look at them, they really highlight the specific priority actions that these cities are going to commit to delivering to actually meet this ambitious goal. African cities have committed to ambitious targets. They have committed to ambitious actions that will not only help to deliver on international, national, and local climate commitments, but will also improve the quality of life for all the cities' citizens and support green economic recovery that is fair and just. Of course, it is evident that cities will need to partner with a range of stakeholders to implement their climate action plans. And this is why this alliance exists, to ensure that there is that partnership. Through the climate action planning process, cities have been engaging their provincial and national governments to strengthen alignment and collaboration and to identify ways for collective implementation of the NDCs. These lessons and learnings have been documented in a national framework, and there is also a report with recommendations that aims to identify opportunities to strengthen vertical integration across different spheres of government. One of the main outcomes from these engagements with national governments is the need to work collectively to access finance for implementation of these ambitious climate actions, from both a mitigation perspective, but more importantly for Africa region and for South Africa in particular, from an adaptation perspective. Therefore, this conversation today, colleagues, is critical to enable cities to directly engage with funders and partners on possible funding mechanisms that are available and what is needed to enable cities access these funds. I will now pause here and ready myself to listen to this rich conversation, but I'll hand over to my esteemed colleague, Ruiz Nodia from WWF, who will be facilitating the session, and really hope that these conversations we are having today will be engaging, useful, and fruitful. So I'd like to really invite active participation from everyone. Luis, over to you. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chikoko, for laying the table for us so beautifully. So I'm going to plunge right into the work of this event. And the format of it is that we have 4 of our Alliance for Climate Action South Africa city members who are going to take from their climate action plans 1 or 2 initiatives that they are seeking finance for and sort of pitch it to the meeting. And then the finance entities will come in and say, you know, what of that is relevant for them or not of interest? I mean, what is of interest or not of interest, and how a city might go about accessing finance from that particular entity for that initiative. And so I just want to make it clear that it's not an actual Shark Tank event. So nobody is really making the finance deals here now. You know, but I think we are all getting to know each other and doing that networking and finding out about each other and providing examples also for other cities and other finance entities to follow. Okay, so I also invite everyone who's attending to please post in the chat function, in the Q&A function, any questions you have, and the panelists will be answering you on those. So yeah, let's get going. So, you know, congratulations to our cities who are showing such leadership by being active members of the Alliance for Climate Action South Africa. They also C40 cities members, and they also are participating in WWF's One Planet City Challenge. So, you know, they're really demonstrating that level of leadership. And we are going to start from the north of our country and proceed south, beginning with our executive capital city and ending with our legislative capital city. So Mr. Selo Mpaga is the divisional head of city sustainability in the city of Tshwane. And Selo, I hand over to you. We can't hear you, Selo. You know, online we can't hear you. Of course, in the room you can hear each other.
Greetings, colleagues, and hello, my dearest friend, Luis. I hope you can hear me now.
Perfect. Thank you. I believe that COP has been having quite some serious COVID cases. So I'm pleased to say,
apologies for that delay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. I'm standing here today very honored to be part of this esteemed event, and in particular noting the importance of financing in sustainability and climate change in general. I was quite pleased to hear actually last week, Tuesday, the announcement that indeed finally there will be some financial muscle that is being channeled to South Africa, which aims to attain the very outcomes of our, amongst others, climate action plans in respective cities, and of course, through the national and provincial governments. From the city of Tshwane, I am standing here today feeling quite excited that having concluded and finalized our climate action plan, there has been quite a significant drive to solicit financial support and partnerships that are critical in ensuring the implementation of this CAP. And of a critical two projects that, Louise, you have requested us to prioritize, which was quite difficult. I must add that our CAP in particular has got 10
So, Selo, let me just tell everybody
outcomes.
That all these cities have fabulous plans with many dimensions, and I forced all of them, just pick 2 to come and pitch to us here. So thank you for doing that, Selo. Thank you for prioritizing. But really, it's very worth going to look at, you know, their whole climate action plan because of all the wonderful things that are in there.
Thank you very much. Focusing on the critical 2 solutions that I would like our partners to consider. One is basically becoming a problem on a daily basis of South African experience is the issue of energy. And noting that the current energy is reliant on, or rather is generated from fossil fuels, in particular coal, we as a city have prioritized solar PV installations for increased electricity generation. And that is over a huge land area that we have, including the rooftops of city-owned buildings. Thanks to C40, that in 2019, they assisted the city to conduct a feasibility study on one of our Roslyn power stations, Roslyn Energy Electricity Department. And out of that, over and above generating that electricity for the plant itself, it is also intended to be a test case whereby we aim to explore a feedback into the grid from a renewable source. So that for us, it's a very critical intervention that we believe that over and above reducing our carbon footprint on energy, especially buildings, will also enhance the ability of normal residents, the private sector, and all the contributors within the city to be able to feed back into the grid, but with a clean energy. And related to that is a biogas and methane generation for electricity from our wastewater treatment plants. And once again, thanks to the city's climate facility, which assisted the city to also conduct a feasibility of that in one of our wastewater treatment plant, Ziekwigat. That has also been lauded by the national government, which is exploring to expand that particular intervention where wastewater treatments are able to generate their own electricity and also being able to reduce the reliance on the grid. So in terms of electricity, those are the 2 critical ones. In terms of water, there is also a looming crisis. I think the entire sub-Saharan countries are experiencing severe water shortages, and South Africa not being an exception. We also have identified a need to intervene in this particular instance. Our CAP is very explicit in targeting a reduction of water losses through improved maintenance of bulk water infrastructure, which is quite aging at this point, and that is costing billions of rands every year due to such losses. We are pitching this as with a hope that it will not only eliminate wastage, but also save the city millions of rands, over the time, but also allowing that particular water source to be channeled where it is needed to the communities. And of course, aligned with that, it's a river rehabilitation program of the two main rivers within that goes through Swani, Apis, and Henops. They are currently amongst the highly polluted due to dysfunctional wastewater treatments along the three metros, City of Joburg, Ekurhuleni, and of course, within our very own borders. And we believe that with this
I'm going to
particular intervention, we will be able to explore partnerships with the province, with national government, and with our two other metros in the city. Those are the two projects that I would like to pitch this afternoon. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you so much for being so succinct. And I think people get the ideas, the details can follow in the chat or in the Q&A or with conversations after the event.
Much appreciated.
So I'm going to turn to the city of Johannesburg and Ms. Lebo Molefe. She's the Director of Air Quality and Climate Change in the city. And I think, Ms. Molefe, you're going to also tell us something about a water infrastructure, natural water infrastructure project.
That's correct, Louis. I wonder if everyone can see me. Excited to be given this opportunity. Yes, definitely. I'll be talking to some water issues. I think as the city of Joburg, and it came out in the CAP, that adaptation measures are also something that we need to focus on. As you know, the city has a balance cap that was endorsed by council. It was actually also launched in March this year. Our cap consists of a series of actions that are prioritized.
Ms. Molefe, your sound is quite bad. Can you maybe just come closer to your speaker?
Let me see.
That's much better already.
It's better.
No, then it went off again.
Is it better?
It's going in and out.
Oh dear, I wonder if it's not there.
So do you want to see if you can fix that? And we go to Mr. Akun in the meantime.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to divert you. Okay, Mr. Isak Akun is the acting divisional head of corporate strategic planning in the Environmental Resource and Waste Management Department of the city of Ekurhuleni. Mr. Akun, tell us about your top two.
Great. I hope my sound is better.
That's perfect.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for the invite to be on the panel today. And I really hope that some of the discussions that we have are productive and change perceptions in people's mind around financing city projects around climate change. Ekurhuleni was probably the last metro to join C40 cities, but we've started with a bang, and we've already possibly 3 months away from finalizing our CAP. We just need some public participation processes. In terms of that, we've got two components as part of our CAP. One we call a Green Cities Action Plan, and I'll be presenting two of the options that we have in terms of mitigation around the Green Cities Action Plan today. What we've put in place was a financing program for energy efficiency refurbishments within the private sector. What we're looking at in terms of this is something that we coin as a PACE program, a Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, which would look at financing energy efficiency improvements and renewable energies in buildings. The loan is attached directly to the property, not to the individual or company, and that's why we think this is a little bit innovative around what we're doing. Governments or private lenders provide financing to building owners, which helps pay for the upfront costs. And thereafter, the loans are paid back by increasing property taxes by a set rate for an agreed upon term. Property owners begin saving on energy costs while paying for the improvements, often resulting in net gains, even with increased property tax that will be delivering to that specific property. Sorry, Louise, I'm getting a bit of feedback.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's cleared up now.
Yeah.
Fantastic. If I can then go ahead. So in terms of the potential benefits of this year, we're looking at long-term financial benefits for the individual homes and businesses by saving on electricity costs and having self-sustaining buildings. Obviously, less energy used through an alternative energy and energy efficiency refurbishments around the household. Reduction of emissions through alternative energy. We're also looking at those who can afford this can benefit as the load would be shed from the main power, and we can understand the kind of issues that we're dealing with in terms of load shedding presently within the country. And then there's definitely co-benefits for the environment and less strain on the grid in totality. In terms of implementation of this process, it's quite innovative, like I said, and we haven't finalized our cap yet, but we're on the path to do that there. Currently, we're proposing we conduct a scoping exercise to fine-tune the appropriate market segments and the technical interventions around this year, what would be the potential impacts, and then the financing needs specifically, and bringing on those partners both in the financial institutes as well as government to assist us in terms of fine-tuning how we're going to fund this year. We'll engage with national government to determine a possible mechanism to enable PACE. That'll be specifically with National Treasury, and then implement local policy and regulations that would be needed to support this year. PACE could be implemented.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, if we get this off the ground, the city could expand the national program, expand it to a national program to apply to more buildings, particularly in residential buildings, and then, to support PACE further. Louise, I'd like
your second one.
Yeah, I'd like to take it to my second one now around the reuse of treated water, wastewater. Again, we're dealing with a potential water security issue within the country based on the climate projections that we've got. The city has a water and sanitation department, as well as an entity that operates our wastewater treatment works, which is called ERVAT. And we're partnering with them to look at large users of non-portable water to supply treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant directly for industrial and irrigation use. The benefits of this project would be revenue generation for the city, something that we haven't explored previously in terms of wastewater treatment, better wastewater management, obviously eliminating some of the cost utilized in terms of creating potable water that's then used for irrigation and other industrial uses, easing the demand on water supply for the city of Ekurhuleni, reusing and recycling our water, and then contributing towards a much needed water secure future. In terms of this year, we're looking at next steps, which would include closer examination of details, such as the demand. Sorry about that. I don't know where that's coming from.
Something happening in the pavilion.
Yeah, it looks like another event is trying to take our limelight.
Yeah.
But basically what we're doing is looking at some regulatory context in terms of this year, infrastructure and institutional arrangements that would be required. We're looking at partnering with the City of Cape Town, and there's been some discussions there because they delivered something similar in terms of the bylaws to distribute treated effluent for irrigation and industrial use. So that in a nutshell is what we're looking at as our top two priorities that we're looking at developing further, and hopefully something would sink in there for the panelists today and the audience that they would take home some much needed lessons from this. Thank you very much, Louise, for the time.
Thank you very much. So I like the fact that we're getting a thread going through this of like mitigation elements, but also the resilience side, with water being, a very strong resilience issue in the country. Okay, let's try going back to Ms. Molefe.
Hello.
Yes.
I don't know.
That is very good now.
It's much better. Okay. I won't be able to use the video on this laptop because it's another one, but the audio is better. So thank you for the opportunity, Louis. You are still saying there's a common thread in the focus on adaptation. Our CAP, the same as all the other CAPs, has a focus on a series of prioritized mitigation and adaptation actions. And as a City of Joburg, we have done an initial scoping in terms of what is it gonna cost us to implement the CAP. And the figure that we came out, that we came with is about 750 million US dollars for CAPEX investment, and about 1.6 billion in USD for OPEX, for operational budget. So those are the figures that we're looking at, which already tells you that the task is big and the task is mammoth. Now, on the focus in the ecological rehabilitation side of things, this is a project that we started in 2020. Just to give a bit of context also, around 2020, when the whole world was descending into South Africa, the City of Joburg experienced a major flooding event. And there were some assessments that were done following that flooding event, which then started putting the ball in motion in terms of this particular project. Now, the focus is the revitalization of ecological corridors in Soweto. Why we are doing that is because the city is experiencing rapid urbanization, and therefore the demand for space to build more houses is becoming urgent. Wetlands and the remaining open spaces offer valuable goods and services such as flood attenuation, cooling during extreme heat events, which we are already starting to experience. This ecological infrastructure is currently under threat because of the densification that is happening in the city and the flooding events that we are starting to experience. The project relates to wetland rehabilitation, including biodiversity conservation through the control of invasive species eradication. So along this stretch of the river, which is the Klep River system, it empties into the Orange River. There's a lot of pollution that happens there. The way the communities are relating with this ecological system is also of concern, because what we realized out of that 2010 event is that there's a lot of waste that gets washed off into this river channel, which then clogs up all this drainage system, and then eventually the water overtops. Now, in terms of the benefits, we will be able to rehabilitate this ecological system so that we can start realizing the ecological goods and services such as stormwater and flood attenuation. As I said, the open spaces will be a continuous open spaces that is also able to host nodal biodiversity protection sites. And then we will be able to obviously mitigate heat and provide that cooling effect in our environment. So Soweto as a place setting for the world will be beautified through this, because you can imagine in a densified setting, if you have these open spaces, they become the place to go and appreciate nature as well. There could also be catalytic, job opportunities through urban agriculture, which will also help with food security. We costed this project, the interventions that are required, at about 3.3 million just for the stretch of the river. And
is that dollars or rands?
That would be in dollars, 3.3 million dollars. So that's what, and what we think is quite exciting about this is that it will be the lived laboratory for even the people of Soweto to start appreciating the goods and services that this system can actually provide them, but also for them to learn about the protection elements as much as there are benefits for them. So we think it's actually a good one. The next other project,
so lovely. Sounds so lovely. Yeah. Your next one.
The other one is we are busy currently through a UK Pact, support. We are doing a feasibility study to check what is how the grid, the city power grid, is going to react with the uptake of EV. So as you all know, South Africa is already experiencing blackouts. The last thing we want is to introduce EV and then make the situation worse. And I'm quite delighted that even the president is actually seeing EV uptake as actually an opportunity for the country, to the extent that the government of South Africa has already published a draft paper on a roadmap for increased production of fully electric vehicles. Now, with that said, through the investigation, through this, assessment, the feasibility that we are doing under UK Pact, we are able to establish that in Joburg alone, there's already around 90 private-owned EV charging stations, which are actually provided by car manufacturing companies such as Volvo, Jaguar, Nissan, BMW. And these are mostly located in shopping malls and gyms. But we all know that, once people, take up EV, they would also want to charge in their houses. So we need to look at the grid capacity to be able to cope with that, but also start looking at what sort of tariffs can we look at and start influencing now the charging time, because the last thing you want is dumb charging when somebody is leaving for work in the morning, or dumb charging when the person comes back from work, because dumb charging takes a lot of energy all at the same time. It's a fast charge, but it takes a lot of energy. So you would rather want to encourage through the tariffs to encourage people to rather, charge their vehicles outside the peak hour periods. We're also thinking that from a city's point of view, we could also look at options of, increasing this network of EV charging stations. Why you'd ask yourself, it's because a lot of people might be hesitant to start buying EV cars based on the fact that the network is probably not wide enough. So if you have to take a trip from Joburg to Durban, you are not quite sure whether you are going to make your trip. But if you can have like a reliable network along the route that will enable you to charge as you go, then you will see that there will be a lot of uptake. Not forgetting the fact that if you look at car manufacturing companies, there's already muting to the fact that they want to move away from combustion engines. And that is, it's making sense, because if we look at the carbon taxes that will come, it makes sense that an industry like that would want to move away from almost like, combustion engines into
also
something.
Our market for these internal combustion engines is collapsing around the world, as
exactly.
Countries go electric vehicle. So ma'am, I'm going to put you there, because what I hear about your pitch is on the feasibility study. You might then want to take action around the grid and so on, and then you're looking at rolling out more charging stations going forward, and that's what you're pitching that you'll need finance for.
That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't get to the quantification.
I know you didn't, and I'm pausing you there.
Okay.
Because we must move on to Cape Town. Do you want to make a closing sentence, ma'am, while I'm cutting you off?
Yes, just to say that we estimated that it would cost us about 500,000 per station, and we're thinking in the next 10 years, if we can do about 20, it will give us a little bit of confidence. Thank you.
No, that is the most important part that you had to add. Thank you for adding it. Rebecca, Ms. Cameron is a senior professional officer on the net zero carbon built environment, which aligns very strongly with our Alliance for Climate Action South Africa's commitment to reaching net zero by 2050. So it's a natural fit, Rebecca. So I invite you to pitch the City of Cape Town's initiatives, whichever you picked out of your bag, because again, there's a whole lot of work that's going on besides what's being pitched here.
Thanks so much, Louise. And yeah, it's a real privilege to be presenting at this event, as well as with my colleagues from the other cities across South Africa. I'm going to, for the participants, I'm just put 2 links into the chat. One is for our climate change strategy, and the other is for our climate change action plan, if you want some more detail. As Louise mentioned, we're obviously going and choosing just a few of our projects. I'd like to speak today about 3 interlinked energy projects. One actually is an adaptation initiative, and the other 2 focus more on climate mitigation. Starting with the adaptation initiative, there are a number of households across the city of, within the city of Cape Town, who currently either have unmet energy demand or
You've just clicked your mic off. Rebecca? 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 She can't hear us either, I think. Geeta, you want to say something?
No, I was just trying to catch Rebecca's attention.
Yeah. Rebecca, pause, Rebecca. Oh no. Can one unmute her manually ourselves?
I'm just doing that now, Louise.
Thank you.
I'm not sure why I was muted.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, Rebecca. We didn't hear anything you said after.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Now we can.
My computer decided to mute itself. I don't know why that.
I'm very sorry for that. So just keep an eye on it so that you can discipline it if it doesn't.
Yeah, sure thing. So as I'm not sure where I was cut off, but I'll just mention
Restart.
we're looking at 3 interrelated energy projects, one of which was actually an adaptation project.
That's right. You're about to explain that.
Okay, great. So apologies for that technical glitch. So importantly, there are many households or a number of households in Cape Town who currently have either unmet energy needs or are currently kind of operating off grid, and they make use of most often unsafe energy sources.
Like paraffin and things like that.
Exactly. And these sorts of energy sources are also key sources of informal settlement fires. And with climate change, it is anticipated that the conditions for fires will get increasingly worse, dry, hot wind conditions. So we need to do everything we can, not only to meet energy needs in terms of SDG 7, but really looking at SDG 13 and understanding that this is an adaptation initiative to address this unmet energy demand in a safe way. So looking at subsidizing alternative energy provision, so saying how do we actually provide households with at least a portion of their energy needs so that they can access electricity, not necessarily electricity, but also other types of energy in a safe way. So whether that's kind of a gas or a PV system, a small scale PV system, and really it would be up to the household to decide. And the idea is we're looking at a kind of an alternative energy type voucher system, and which would be implementing the free basic alternative energy, electricity or energy national policy too, and in line with the city's objectives. This is quite an innovative approach because it would also be about kind of partnering with the private sector energy providers as well as with households. It could help unlock further finance for these alternative energy sources that are cleaner and safer. So that's the first project. The second one then speaks to the city's ambitions of carbon neutrality by 2050, and also our ambitions around net zero carbon commitments for our buildings, both our municipal buildings as well as residential and commercial buildings by 2030 and 2050 respectively. So in order to do this, the city wants to, increasingly ensure that we provide renewable energy, clean energy that is affordable at scale across the grid. And so the city has a number of initiatives that are currently underway. Two of them I'd like to mention today is the achievement of our net zero carbon municipal buildings roadmap, where we're looking at implementing, we've done a pre-feasibility study to implement 30 megawatts of renewable energy on city-owned land, and these would be city-owned projects, and a minimum of 20% energy efficiency across our municipal building portfolio by 2030 in order to achieve our net zero carbon targets. It's important to note that the city already has a number of projects in our pipeline to achieve this. So it's only a portion of this kind of ambitious 30 megawatt project or program that we're looking for additional funding for. And so it's about the 20 megawatts. So, and then there's another portion which is actually looking at financing options to achieve a city-owned renewable energy program that would help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions across the city by 25%. So yeah, so I'll pause there. So 3 energy projects, 1 adaptation and 2 mitigation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being very clear and succinct. I must say, I always wonder about all this energy efficiency projects. Once your energy is all renewable, then it doesn't really matter if you're efficient or not. But anyway.
Well, it just gets more expensive for us to provide renewable energy. So we want to really ramp up our energy efficiency so that we can, we only build as much new.
I understand. Okay, so, I mean, thank you very much. The cities have managed to present us with some very interesting and potential impactful, if they could take it to scale, very impactful initiatives. So now we're going to turn to the finance entities in the room, and they're going to tell us which of these they might be interested in and how a city might go about getting money from them. So we're going to start with Mr. Michael Jennings, who's the strategic grant manager at the SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and they are one of the direct access accredited entities for the Green Climate Fund. So I'm very pleased, Mike, you said I may call you Mike, Mr. Jennings. I'm very pleased that, there were quite a few adaptation initiatives that are, really what I understand SANBI is looking for. So over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Louise. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, great. Thanks very much for this opportunity. So I'm aware that the intention here isn't to tell you about SANBI and give you a background of what of what we're doing. I know that. But to allow me to talk to the potential funding of some of the interventions that have been presented today by the cities, I just do need to give you a little bit of context and talk about timelines, because those are of course important. So to clarify, SANBI is not a funder. As you said, we're a direct access entity of the Green Climate Fund. So that means we're able to work with national and subnational partners to develop funding proposals and eventually present those to the GCF, who then decide if the funding flows. So, people often, or partners come to us and say, SANBI, we need money. And we say, it's not us that decides. We help you develop, we propose it to the GCF. If it's approved, we oversee and manage, you through the project. But the type of projects that SANBI is able to support is guided by our accreditation profile. And that's important for the conversation that we're having now. Projects must be, for example, adaptation focused, as you said. They can have mitigation co-benefits, but the work must have a pro-poor, gender-just focus. So it's very developmental, the work that SANBI does. Secondly, the projects can be up to $50 million, which in the GCF language is considered a small project. So it gives you an idea of the kind of scale that we're talking at. The GCF's only really interested in large-scale interventions, and some of the numbers mentioned here today are quite staggering. But anyway, that's in the right ballpark. And then, importantly, SANBI is accredited for grant-based projects only. So making the business case as to why the GCF should invest in an adaptation project becomes very important. So equally, anything that generates a return on investment, the GCF would say, you should be taking out a loan. Why are you asking for grant finance? And SANBI isn't accredited for that. So automatically, that discounts a lot of what's being discussed today. But then also the last really important point on this part is that SANBI's mandates and our core competencies are related to natural resource management, meaning that all our projects that we support would always be centered around nature-based solutions to climate change. And again, there are some, that have been noted here, things like ecosystem-based adaptation, interventions that benefit vulnerable communities. So to give you, it kind of gives you an idea of the projects that SANBI can support, how that overlaps with the projects that have been presented here today. There's two main points on that. So firstly, I won't go into the details of how we got here, but SANBI, through a widely consultative and transparent process, has arrived at a portfolio of 7 projects, which are currently in various stages of development. So these themes include things like ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, ecosystem-based adaptation for water security. And all of these projects will ultimately have an on-the-ground footprint, within local municipalities and perhaps metros. For the project that's most advanced, what we call our Eco Disaster Risk Reduction project, the lead project partners are DFFE Natural Resource Management and the National Disaster Management Center. They've already identified a number of districts based on a climate science-driven approach, looking at where climate-intensified floods, droughts, and fires are going to affect vulnerable communities, hit them the hardest. So in some sense, the project areas have already been identified, but within that, there still needs to be a site selection process. So we haven't actually got to the ground yet, but the GCF has only now appointed consultants to support SANBI to develop a funding proposal, and that's likely to take 18 months. And that's the most advanced of our projects. So, through that phase, there'll be, as I say, some site selection and extensive and intensive engagement at national and subnational, provincial, district, and local and on-the-ground levels. So there is a need for project partners to work with local governments, in designing these interventions, but we're a little bit away from that yet. As I say, we have a portfolio of projects, but they might, and the specific sites aren't selected yet, but where they intersect with projects like some of which have been presented today, and I'll speak about some now. There's definitely a potential for those to be part of the SANBI projects. Secondly, and one that's perhaps even a bit more interesting, one of our projects will be a bit different in that it's going to be a grants facility for locally led adaptation projects, which will be an upscale of SANBI's current small grants facility project funded by the Adaptation Fund, which some of you may have heard. So I won't go into a lot of detail, but that's a project that's known as Enhanced Direct Access. So direct access is when SANBI with project partners designs a project, the donor, for example, the Green Climate Fund, gives funds to implement what has been programmed, and you report against what you've designed. Enhanced direct access is when a facility is designed by the lead partners supported by SANBI. The donor then provides funding, which is programmed at a later stage based on applications against that facility. So essentially, the responsibility of approving projects, these grant projects, is transferred from the donor, from the international level, to the national level, SANBI and partners. And these projects could be anything from groups of smallholder farmers who need drip irrigation, right up to restoration of degraded wetlands, as got mentioned today. And there's also early talk, and this is interesting, of a city's resilience modality that supports local government to integrate climate change into its planning and service delivery operations, and potentially grants it up to 20 million rand each under that window. So linking back to SANBI's accreditation profile and mandate, these projects under the locally led adaptation grants facility will have to be adaptation focused, they'll have to be grant based, they'll have to benefit vulnerable communities, and include a focus on natural resource management, or EVA broadly. So from what has been presented today, I see this, I'm just making notes here, there's a bit of a focus on energy, bulk water infrastructure, wastewater treatment plants. Those would fall outside of projects that SANBI could support. But then there is, what I'm seeing emerging is a river rehabilitation within cities, a metropolitan open space suite of projects. And we'd of course have to make the links to flooding and extreme weather events, which we've all seen the data. Those are likely to get more severe. So I think there's something that could work there. But the catch is that the current small grants facility project is wrapping up, and we're in the process of developing a methodology for how that could be scaled up as a GCF project. That methodology writing will be done by December. Then we go into concept note writing phase, endorsement of that, full funding proposal writing phase, and it's likely that the earliest funding will flow through that facility is probably end of 2023. So it's a comment you'll hear a lot when talking about the Green Climate Fund, the timeline of how long it takes to access funding, and that's just the reality of it. It's been a bit frustrating, for Sandy, but we do have a great relationship with the fund. They have a huge interest in financing adaptation projects submitted by direct access entities. So we're excited about our portfolio, and I think we're well placed to facilitate the flow of GCF funds for adaptation projects, some of which could, intersect with what's been presented today, but we're a little bit off that funding flowing into South Africa. But I think,
So
really
I think
interesting suites, and
I think that it's very exciting, this overlap between some of what you do for and some of what the cities are wanting to do. And I'm sure, people will take that conversation offline with you as well.
We look forward to that. Thanks.
So now we want to come to our second direct access accredited entity in South Africa. And actually this is for Southern Africa, which is our Development Bank of Southern Africa. And it's Miss Nomza Zondi who's going to speak to us. She's a climate change specialist there at the bank. And sorry, Suren, I've skipped over you. I will come back to you. And Ms. Zondi, I'm going to ask you to speak quite directly to the things that the cities have raised. Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you for the opportunity as well for us giving us, the opportunity to hear from the cities what they've got in terms of their climate action plans. As they were taking us through, the prioritized issues or activities in their plans. I was just jotting down, some of the initiatives that may, kind of be put together in terms of some kind of a program, and maybe package them for some of the climate and environment funds that we are accredited to as a development finance institution in South Africa. So basically, I would talk to you around the approach that we use with regards to financing city projects. Most of these colleagues that have actually made presentation here, they're coming from the metros. And our belief is that they've got good balance sheets. They've got the capacity to implement their projects. And what we usually do is if they've got certain projects, they would release the tender, and we would actually, bid and compete with all other financial institutions. However, with regards to the transition towards low carbon development infrastructure, there is also the opportunity of us leveraging on our partnership with the funds, could be GCF or Global Environment Facility. So I was looking at the programs here that were mentioned. Currently, DBSA is working on a waste and on a water program. It would include the actual wastewater as well, associated initiatives. So yes, the municipalities are actually welcome to engage with the bank further around that. I also noticed that Ekurhuleni mentioned, production of biogas, maybe from their landfills. This is another program that we think we can even look at. If we can combine, the initiatives from different cities, we can even put together a proposal for the Global Environment Facility around this. But I just also want to go into detail with regards to some of the projects that we are currently financing together with the Global Environment Facility, particularly for the cities. The GEF has got an impact program whereby basically in terms of cities, they are looking at an integrated approach. When you look at cities, obviously, you will not be focusing on a particular sector. There's different initiatives across different sectors. There could be waste, there could be transport, planning, and so forth. So under the impact programs, the integrated cities approach, we currently have City of Johannesburg as DBSA, collaborating with UN Environment, participating in that program. We are looking at different components. We're looking at eco districts. We are looking at, I may mention as well that as affluent as some of our cities may look, there is still issues around food security. So we're also looking at assisting the farmers to integrate sustainable farming practices in Johannesburg, for example. In that project, we have actually started, we are training them under the program, how to integrate those sustainable practices and assist them as well, how to ferry their produce to the Johannesburg market, for example. And also under the same integrated approaches program, we are also looking at, obviously there is social housing. So under that particular component, we are trying to see if we can retrofit some of the units and combine also with greenfields kind of developments, and also come up with a guideline for our cities going forward, so that they have some kind of guidance with regards to integrating climate related or green practices in construction of social housing. It's big projects in South Africa. Therefore, we are hoping that that guideline can assist not only City of Johannesburg, but other cities can look into that guideline and implement the recommendations. Again, under the same program for City of Johannesburg, as I've indicated, is an integrated approaches program. We also looking at assisting them to manage biodegradable waste. One of the subcomponents there is developing a waste management strategy, as well as production of a biogas gas from one of their landfill sites, Robinson Dip. Basically, even there, we also want to see if they can use the same gas or fuel as fuel for their fleet, for their metro buses. We have also taken lessons, for example, from their initiative of converting some of their buses into a dual fuel running buses. We've taken those lessons, we've taken, the needs around training and capacity building. So yes, we are actually in this program, we are going to assist the city around, producing their own biogas, producing their own fuel for their own buses. And at the end of the day, we want to influence the planning process when we look at this integrated approaches program of the GEF. We want to make sure that the planning process basically will adopt sustainable kind of measures, approaches going forward. So we're going to take the lessons around the corridors of freedom, which is the eco district part, and then we're going to take the lessons from the sustainable farming practices. We're going to take the lessons from the social housing, lessons from the waste management component, and then assist the city then to see how they can integrate that whole kind of different approach now into their planning processes going forward. We are hoping that other cities as well may take lessons from this kind of initiative. With this project, it was actually funded under GEF 6, the 6th programming cycle of the GEF. We unfortunately didn't have a city participating at GEF 7. Hello? We didn't have a city that participated in GEF 7, but we are also hoping that for GEF 8, which is going to commence next year, we can work with one of these cities that are on the panel today, and maybe put together something of the same, even though they may have different components because maybe their priorities are different. And also, I want to talk to another opportunity that we have with the Global Environment Facility. Currently, we are working with 3 of the metros, Johannesburg, eThekwini, and Tshwane. We want to pilot the technology around electric buses. Jeff has already given us some funds around this. We are going to purchase about 50 of the buses and demonstrate the technology. We also plan to take lessons from the Cape Town case study. We are hoping that we can also create an enabling environment. We will work with government, the relevant authorities, and we also want to partner with a private sector as well, because we want to localize, the production of some of the components in the country. We also want to, I have heard a label was talking around, a study that they are doing around the impact of uptake of electric vehicles on the grid. So in this program, we also want to see if we can integrate the renewable energy into the charging of the buses, as well as the recycling of the batteries and so forth. And we are hoping again that it's not only going to end at a demonstration phase. We are going to take advantage of our partnership with the GCF going forward and roll out or scale up the uptake of these buses in other municipalities that may want to participate later on. Yeah. We are going to put in our own funding and mobilize maybe concessional funding from the Green Climate Fund. And we hope that the cities then can, operate electric vehicles going forward. So I would say that the DBSA is actually open and would want to engage further with the cities around their climate action plans, because it is when we know what is in those plans that we are then able to guide in terms of the requirements around the funds themselves, to say, okay, with this particular initiative, we can work together and put together a program that would meet the criteria of the funds. So fantastic. I would say, yes, we are open, and please do one-on-ones with us going forward. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Ms. Zonde. Thank you for that open door. And also some couple of interesting things that I pick up from what you're saying. The one is that sometimes these funds are interested in multiple city things where cities are working with each other to achieve things. So I think that's one interesting point. And then, the other one was that just because it's climate, we don't have to only look at GCF, but there are also other funds that are relevant. Yes, so I'm going to ask Mr. Søren David. He is from the NAMA facility, the head of the technical support unit there. And may I ask the speakers just to distinguish whether you provide loan finance, like DBSA, I imagine, does concessional loan finance, or whether it's grants, like SANBI providing grants. So over to you, Mr. David, Dr. David, sorry, my apologies.
Thanks very much for the introduction and having me. My PhD actually stems from a time in South Africa, where I was writing on the new constitution and the distribution of powers between the national government and provinces and municipalities. So
exactly relevant to this conversation.
So I know a bit about that topic. I've also been the program manager for a GIZ project in terms of promoting renewable energy and energy efficiency between 2012 and 2016. So I know the South African context pretty well. At the NAMA facility, we do have actually one project that stems from South Africa. And I would hope that some of the persons on this call are actually aware of it. It's the South African Public Sector Energy Efficiency Project that provides support for energy efficiency measures in public buildings in all 3 spheres of government in South Africa. And it's a project that is implemented together with the Department of Public Works, the Department of Energy, and Department of Environmental Affairs. GIZ is serving as a NAMA support organization, and there is 20 million euros of funding that have been availed by the NAMA facility. And to already respond to your question, that is grant funding. That is a rather large chunk of money that is already available, and the respective grant contracts have been concluded now. So there is actually something to tap into. And maybe to take a step back and just quickly outline what the NAMA facility does. So this is about mitigation actions, nationally appropriated mitigation actions. So we are not funding, in general, adaptation measures. The focus is on mitigation. And here, of course, the funding purpose is quite specific. It is energy efficiency in public buildings. So that funding is availed. I'm not sure if it makes sense to then comment on the specific projects that have been presented here. Some of them actually might fall in the scope of that line that is available. Everything that I've heard, I would say is quite laudable, good projects. Some of them, of course, had a focus on adaptation. They would fall a bit outside the scope of that current funding that has already been availed by the NAMA facility and would also not be eligible for future projects. And then other projects might actually be suitable for NAMA facility funding, even if they are not focusing on energy efficiency and thus fall into the scope of the current project. That would then require separate funding request, and the way the NAMA facility functions is that we have reoccurring annual calls where you can hand in what we call project outlines. And then there is a selection process, and ultimately, I wouldn't say years later, but sometime later, you might be awarded funding from the NAMA facility, just as has happened for this one project that I have been mentioning. I think from a perspective of the NAMA facility, we would like to see progress in the implementation of this particular project where funding has been availed, not necessarily before we award new projects to South Africa, but I think it is instrumental that one ongoing project makes actually progress to see that that another project could actually move forward. So in other words, from those projects by municipalities that have now been presented that fall into the scope of renewables, like what has been said by Chuan in terms of PV and biogas, once again, I think quite pertinent interventions, but probably right now not suitable for new funding from the NAMA facility. In general, if South African municipalities would like to present a new funding request with us, there is ongoing calls. We just launched one on Tuesday that has a funding envelope of another 100 million euros of grant funding, but it is a competitive process. So that is not funding reserved for South Africa and not for South African municipalities, but you're basically pitching against everybody else in ODA eligible countries with all sorts of possible interventions that have to focus on mitigation once again. So I think as of now, my advice would be really for all municipalities to get in contact with the DOE and with GIZ if they want in South Africa to really learn more about this ongoing initiative and how they could tap into that funding that is available. One of the essential parts of this particular project is that it intends to encourage the intervention of ESCOs, something that we've seen for long years in South Africa as a desire, but there has always been the problem that there has not been enough equity actually around from these energy service companies. And that's something where the project intends to intervene and make a difference to actually provide them with equity so that they can offer those services to municipalities provinces and also to national government institutions. And the range of interventions in terms of energy efficiency in building can take the whole range of what you might imagine, all the way going from the rather low-hanging fruits of lighting all the way to insulation and more efficient ways of cooling for that matter. So there's a whole range of interventions that can be funded from this project. And once again, it would be the help desk that will be installed at the Department of Energy that would be there to provide more information. And maybe that's all I can say for now. Once again, all the projects I've now listened into carefully, I thought were great demonstration of the capacities you have in South Africa and municipalities. That's already great. That I mean, you don't see in so many other countries that actually municipalities have their own staff, their own capacities to prepare those projects. I think that's great. And I also once again got the impression that in South Africa there is funding available, but I think the discourse today shows once again that the communication needs to be better so that people know where they can actually tap into funding. I'm sure the project I know referred to, some people might say, oh, but that's fantastic. Why didn't I know about it? So if that was already something I could achieve to make aware of it, that would be already worth the time I spent with you today. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. David. You are referring us to the Department of Energy and to GIZ. And what I will request is that you let me have the right contact persons in those two institutions to talk to, and then I can share that with the cities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are going to go to the African Development Bank. And Ms. Astrid Haas, who is the urban and she is active with the Urban and Municipal Development Fund, is going to tell us about the AFDB's involvement in this space. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. And let me just start by echoing Søren's last point about this is the range of projects that were presented today just really is incredible in terms of capacities that municipalities and cities have in South Africa compared to many other cities and municipalities that we work with across the continent. And so very much kudos to those. And actually it's really sort of inspired me to take a look at the city climate action plans more directly and the range of the projects and the pipelines that are in there. So let me talk to the AFDB and sort of mention some of in that discourse, mention some of the projects that came up today. So the African Development Bank obviously has a long history of working in cities, but a relatively new history of working with cities. And there's a distinction there. So we did, one of the things that I worked on recently was a loan portfolio analysis of the AFDB in the last 10 years. And there's a lot of work that we've done in cities and in a lot of the areas that were mentioned today. So in energy, in water, and that continues. But particularly since 2019, there's been an increasing focus for the bank to work with cities. And this has taken three forms. In particular, one was the establishment of an urban division, which has regional focal points for each of the regions. So there is a regional focal point for South Africa, and I will share that contact because that is your point of contact within the bank. For cities in South Africa, for who you want to reach out to, that there is one contact, and I will share that contact with my colleague. The second was the establishment of the Urban and Municipal Development Fund. As Louise mentioned, this is where I work. This is a multi-donor trust fund. The Urban and Municipal Development Fund provides technical assistance, and in particular for project preparation. Now, a lot of the projects I think we heard today, I mean, some were more explicitly mentioned than others, but I think have already gone through the preparation phase. But for other projects where there is sort of looking at the preparation side of projects, that's where the Urban and Municipal Development Fund is active. And then the third piece, which is probably most interesting for South Africa, is that there was the launch of the subnational finance guidelines in 2019, which means the bank can actually lend directly to subnational entities now, and hasn't done so. Well, under these subnational finance guidelines, it has extended one line of credit to date, but is looking to more proactively do direct lending to subnational entities. All of this, however, caveated that the bank is still, and I think this is really important to mention, as someone who works with cities and gets very excited, particularly when I talk about this, I think there's still the caveat that the bank is, the shareholders of the bank are the national treasuries and the Ministry of Finance. So whatever we do, even if we do it directly with cities, has to be in line with what the Ministry of Finance or the National Treasury, in the case of South Africa, does with the bank. So what does this mean? It means specifically for you as cities, both for the grant finance under the Urban and Municipal Development Fund and or loan finance under the African Development Bank, you have to be working directly with your national treasury for the grant financing to provide a letter of no objection, for the loan financing to make sure that these projects are within the country strategy paper that the bank has with South Africa. These country strategy papers are updated periodically. And so part of the role of the urban focal point is to connect with you as cities, to know what your priorities are, to connect you to the process that determines these country strategy papers. So I really encourage you to reach out to the urban focal point as early as possible in processes. So not only with the projects and that were presented today, but others that you may have, so that these can be incorporated in overall discussions that happen with the bank. Now, specifically to the projects that were mentioned today, I think two sets of projects stood out, not because so I think, most of the projects that are here would fit to financing for the bank. And so I think that, all are worth reaching out to the urban focal point on and seeing where that stands. But I think in terms of the work that we've done with the Urban and Municipal Development Fund, the river rehabilitation programs mentioned by Twane and Joburg are very similar to a project that we're actually doing right now with a river basin rehabilitation in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So there's good precedent there of working through that. And that's really with the support of the national government as well. And that has been very successful. And so I think there's a lot of sort of, how do we say, good vibes to build on with that. And so I think those are great. And then I think the one that piqued my interest the most, I work in municipal finance, specifically, that's my area, is the project that was presented by Ekuleni around the renewable energy in buildings and property tax. And so, Isaac, I would love to connect with you more around that, to learn more about that. And in particular, also, if it's not a project, like the thing with the capacity that has been shown today is one way that we want to work together within the African Development Bank, within the Urban Municipal Development Fund, is to build a cities network so cities can learn from each other. And I think here, the South African cities provide a lot of good learning experiences, both in terms of building projects around climate change mitigation and adaptation. I should say both of those are eligible with the bank. We have an increasing focus on adaptation, but we do mitigation as well. But also, I think, and Hastings obviously can speak to this as well and speak to this more, together with C40 cities, where we have launched a CFO network across the continent. And part of the reason is that a lot of the, if I'm not mistaken, forgive me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the presenters who presented here today come from specific departments working around infrastructure or working around climate, net zero. But actually then to bridge that gap to the CFOs and the directors of treasury or whatever that is, who actually then go into the negotiations on the finance, that is something that we're trying to strengthen too. And I think C40 has great data around how this really helps streamline activities. So we're working around that piece too. So all of that to say is that, the African Development Bank is currently very much open for business for working with cities directly. And we're still learning how to, because it's relatively new for us. But I think really the first, there's options for grants, for technical assistance around project preparation, there's options for loans. Really work together closely with your urban focal point, and in this case, it's a she'll be able to direct you accordingly on how to navigate the various processes in the bank and what that in.
Thank you. So, I mean, I think that's a nice, the fact that if people want to work with networks of cities, here we have C40 cities as one of the key partners of the Alliance for Climate Action, and that's exactly what they do. So good that thank you for mentioning that. So now we want to turn to two entities which are more, in my understanding, I might have it wrong. Oh no, sorry, there's Mr. Banerjee first. Okay, so I now have this problem. We have 10 minutes. We want to hear from Mr. Banerjee of the International Finance Corporation and from the C40 Cities Finance Facility. And I wouldn't mind if we can allow the South African Local Government Association to do a few closing words for us. So I'm really asking, that Mr. Banerjee coming at the end and Ingrid sitting in the venue there, if you can be very sharp with what you want to tell us. Okay, so Mr. Banerjee, Mr. Sumya Banerjee is a principal investment officer with the International Finance Corporation. So please take it away for us.
Thanks. I'll try to be short. So International Finance Corporation is a part of the World Bank Group, and IFC specifically deals mostly with the private sector, but it also includes subnationals and cities. So, so IFC has a long-standing relationship with cities. There are certain aspects on how we define which cities we can work with and which we cannot, but I'll not go into those. Most of the metro cities in South Africa, they pretty much qualify. And we have had lending relationships and various other product relationships directly with cities like Johannesburg, with Ekurhuleni. We have currently advisory relationships with Ekurhuleni and with eThekwini. We are also engaged with City of Cape Town. So in short, we directly lend and also provide technical assistance to various cities. In terms of the projects that were presented to us, so all of these projects pretty much in terms of the focus areas of IFC, they would very much qualify. But IFC would normally look at its lending operations more from a commercial principle. So these IFC's own money is not grant money, it is not concessional money, it is fully commercial. Typically with the cities, so far at least, we have focused on lending against the credit rating of the city, pretty much like other commercial banks, pretty much like DBSA's commercial operations. That has been kind of the mainstay. We have also done some guarantee operations, but all of these are commercially priced products. So one question that I have is when we are talking about these specific projects, so are these going to be ultimately subsumed into the budget of the city and therefore packaged in their regular financing arrangement? So that is pretty much like normal operations. If there is more of a bent towards the climate angle, we could look at it as financing that is backed by the credit. But the City of Ekurhuleni presentation seemed to indicate that, particularly for the housing, the financing would be attached to the housing. So then how is it going to work? Is it going to be a PPP project? Now, to that extent, PPPs have always been a big focus for us. There have not been that many PPPs in South Africa. Typically, the size of the individual PPPs is a bit larger in the South African context. It takes quite some time to get approvals for it, but PPPs is something we can definitely support. In such situations, typically what happens is that the city runs a tender, awards the PPP project to a majority private participant, and IFC has the ability to support the city not only for the transaction advisory, but also to fund the ultimate project. So in this context with the city of eThekwini, our transaction advisory is already engaged in one of the water projects, and potentially IFC, that is our department, the lending department, can get involved later on as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that globally, IFC has been doing a lot of work in sustainability linked financing. So IFC for many years, for a decade, I think, has been one of the largest issuers of green bonds, green paper, that is on our own balance sheet. So we issue green paper. So we fund ourselves and then we use that money to fund commercial projects. around the world, and we have been one of the largest green bond issuers. But we have also anchored projects and financings by our clients, many of them private, but some of them cities as well, in raising green financing. Now, of late, particularly in the last 2 years, sustainability linked financing has been accelerating in pace. I think this can be brought to South Africa. It can be brought to cities. We are already mandated in with a private clients focused in South Africa for sustainability linked financing. And I personally believe that we can roll it out for many of these operations and that the cities are contemplating, because the kind of projects that you're talking about that fits in perfectly into the sustainability linked financing, there's a huge appetite for it. This appetite is growing. The more the appetite, the more the cost of the financing is driven down. IFC has a tremendous track record in this already, and we want to make this a cornerstone of some of the value that we bring in. We also bring in advisory. Typically, we bring in advisory mainly for the verification purposes, for stamp of approval, for structuring the financing in a way that is most beneficial for the cities. But these are commercial financing. So the way typically that this would work is that more and more this is moving away from use of proceeds, that are these going towards sustainability linked projects that the city has, more towards KPIs. Are you achieving what you said that you would achieve? And the way that these are incentivized is more by either giving a interest rate discount if you achieve your KPIs, right? Or if you don't achieve your KPIs, the interest rate goes up, right? So there are various structures, and for this,
so performance-based,
exactly.
Loans.
Exactly.
Finance, yeah.
Exactly. So look, I think we cannot go into all the details. I wanted to put this out there. We have an engagement with several of the cities who have spoken today, very interested in the space. We would love to do more. We can do normal, plain vanilla commercial financing. We can also do sustainability linked financing, which are more value add. But one area which I think also AFDB spoke about is that we also have to, we are part of the DFI community. We have an active engagement with the National Treasury as well. It has to be approved by the government of South Africa. It has to fit into the overall strategy. The same kind of things apply. And the other thing is that we cannot bid into a tender. So typically when the city is raising money, if there is an RFP, we normally don't bid. However, we are perfectly fine to offer unilaterally what financing we can offer and potentially an outline of terms. Fantastic. And it is up to the cities to determine whether it is competitive or not. Yeah. I'll stop there.
No, thank you, Mr. Banerjee. I think that there are wonderful, connections being established here. And if this event had just achieved that everyone starts to know about each other in the whole system, then that's a great thing. So we're going to close with Ms. Ingrid Simon, who's a program director at the C40 Cities Finance Facility, because for a lot of these projects, the connection between the city and its proposed projects and the finance entities is that you have to develop bankable projects. And I think you sometimes need assistance with that. So Ingrid, over to you.
Thank you, Louise. And I'm just glancing at the clock on the screen, and I realize we're running out of time. So I'm going to try to
I'm going to ask this. I'm going to ask this. So some of the other presenters took a bit longer. So they will now have the respect to wait and listen to you for a few extra minutes. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. So just before I start, I just wanted to let you know, at the beginning, when the cities were pitching their different projects, I actually took quite detailed notes and jotted down some feedback on each and every single one of them with some very, very concrete questions and advice. But unfortunately, we're just not going to have the time for it. So I just want to say I'm happy to touch base on that informally offline. Later, and as you mentioned, no deals being made, but some informal feedback. Very happy to do that. So the C40 Cities Finance Facility is a project preparation facility. So that means that we provide technical assistance true grant funding. So we are helping to prepare the projects to get them to a bankable level such that they are finance ready. So that means, because sometimes people get a little bit confused by the name. We are not a grantor, we are not a lender, but really a technical preparation facility. So besides doing the technical preparation, we also assist with linking to finance and linking to investors, development banks, multilaterals, et cetera, and assisting with the replication and upscaling components. Because we have very little time, just maybe a couple of very concrete points of advice when reaching out to project preparation facilities. So I would recommend to the cities to, before they put a lot of time in their submissions, to double check if the project preparation facilities which they are reaching out to are actually focusing on the national or subnational level. Because for the C40 Cities Finance Facility, as the word says it, obviously we are focusing at the subnational level, but that's definitely not the case for all project preparation facilities. Second point is also not all project preparation facilities support adaptation and mitigation. So up to date, the CFF has predominantly been supporting mitigation projects, but we are also starting to support mitigation projects. And we had a wonderful example earlier from Tshwane, where we supported a river rehabilitation project, which we've also presented this week at COP26 as part of the showcase for the UNFCCC award we've received in the climate friendly investment category. The third thing is that not all project preparation facilities focus at the same scale of project, and they may also have certain sectoral interests, and they also may look at different stages of project preparation. So some may be very upstream, some may be a little bit more advanced where they support. Some only do very targeted support for one missing studies, others take you through from A to Z, a little bit similar to what the CFF would do. So check in advance and don't hesitate to reach out to them to get this guidance. Then when you submit projects, I would say look at the nexus of finance, legal, and technical very early on, because we see a lot of examples where either one of the three aspects of the triangle sometimes gets less attention, and to set yourself up from success, I would say look at the tree always in a holistic manner.
And those three are
into consideration the equity and inclusion aspects early on, and strengthen your proposal by making sure that your projects are mainstreamed into wider strategies and plans. And I think that all the projects which have been presented today are very well on the way, as they're all part of the climate action plans of the respective cities. And then finally, make sure you develop a really, really good concept notes, because it will help make your project stand out. And a good example of that is, for instance, we've heard a lot about river rehabilitation projects today. I can share that that the CFF is receiving a lot of applications for river rehabilitation projects. So make it very clear, like why your project should be supported, and why you have a strong case. I'll leave it at that, glancing at the clock, but as I said, very, very happy to provide some very concrete feedback offline afterwards on the individual concepts shared today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. In fact, I mean, now, you all have each other's email, all the participants here have each other's email. And so, Ingrid, if you would put your advice on that mailing list, that would be fantastic. And thank you for your great grace in trimming your own self down to such a short input. And then, I mean, I must say that I'm a bit sad because now we can't have each other talking to each other, which I was hoping to do. But, perhaps what we've done is made some connections, and a lot of fruitful stuff can happen offline. And so I'm going to give the closing word over to Ms. Dora Marema. She's the head of municipal sustainability at the South African Local Government Association. And I've posted in the chat, if people don't know what SALGA is, exactly what it is. So Dora, over to you.
Thank you so much, Salga. Sorry, thank you so much, Louise, and and everyone. I think it's been a very rich afternoon, just listening to what the cities are doing, but also, I think most importantly, listening to the financing organizations in terms of how they could be able to support the effort. And I think as Salga, we are thrilled to hear this and to be part of these initiatives. From our own side as SALGA, we are looking at supporting municipalities. SALGA before didn't have this portfolio focusing on municipal sustainability. It was established formally last year in 2020, literally with the aim of supporting initiatives like this. We have formed a partnership with the South African Cities Network and the National Treasury City Support Program, basically to actually take care of some of the issues that were raised here. I think, someone mentioned the fact that, cities may not know that there is that's kind of funding support that is available. And what we are trying to do is to establish a city sustainability learning network that will coordinate all the support and the work that is being provided to metros and intermediate cities by the various support organizations nationally and internationally, for example, the likes of C40, ICLE, WWF, and others, as well as the work that is being done and support provided by the sector departments to ensure that the environmental sustainability practices and climate change initiatives in cities are being mainstreamed throughout their planning and development processes. So we are excited because we can see that there is a gap in pulling together all of this support information that exists, that is there, and all of the opportunities that the cities could be able to take advantage of. Our hope is to have like a dashboard, a place where we could gather all the information. For example, if a Buffalo City or a Mangaung or a Rustenburg municipality would like to also put together a climate action plan or look for funding for some of their projects, they could be able to access that platform that we will provide for them to see who is available out there in terms of providing support. But lastly, also to provide a platform for information sharing, to profile some of these best practices that are already existing in some of the cities, foster peer-to-peer learning, also look at influencing policy, and also ensuring that cities are able to drive some of the initiatives. For example, there's an initiative on the Green Buildings program to look at some of the conflicting legislations. And so we are looking at facilitating all of those initiatives to make sure that the climate change response definitely is happening at a local level without any barriers. So that is the work that we're doing, and SALGA is really committed to mobilizing and supporting metros and intermediate cities in South Africa to step up and to make a contribution towards a global ambition for climate resilience that will put the people first, put people and nature first in pursuing a resilient world where we really just don't survive these climate shocks and stresses, but we thrive in spite of them. So from our side, we are very, very appreciative and very supportive. We are not going to be looking at replacing any of these initiatives, but we would like to be able to pull together all of this support information to make sure that instead of the work that has been done with the 4 cities that have been supported by C40, that this work can also lend itself into the other metros and also into the intermediate cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dora. And also, I mean, there are some cities on the call from the rest of the continent. So I think, we also as an Alliance for Climate Action have to look forward to the next COP, which will be in Africa, in Egypt, and start working more regionally with our other African partner cities and other organizations. So thank you everyone for your indulgence to stay on and give everyone a chance to give their little piece, and we hope to see each other again. And with that, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, Isaac.
Bye, and thank you.